Okay, so I don't have a terrible lot of information to go through, but it is very, very important, these next 3 slides. This is where we left off with, okay? But I thought I heard of a crumpling up of a bag of chips, some sort. Okay? So, what is happening in your mouth, whoever had that, what is happening in your mouth to help you in the digestion of those Cheez-Its or whatever? Yes, they're breaking it up mechanically. What else inside your mouth? Okay? That saliva is doing 2 things. What would it possibly be? Yeah, it's going to moisten it up and also initiate the digestion of those Cheez-Its. One of the things that I think that we came up with for gone vintage with that. Okay, is that what you call it? Retro or vintage? Old? Okay, so moving forward, the reason that these next few slides are so vital is because, yes, carbohydrates are important for our diet, but proteins are just as important, if not more important. And that's what happens inside this stomach. The, the process where it is initiated. We certainly know that lots of acid comes out of this stomach. And for anyone who's ever, because of, I don't know if you want to call it food poisoning or that of maybe just smelling something that makes you nauseated, these gastric pits that we're talking about have receptor sites in there that will send a signal to your brain that's saying, we don't feel very good. And that's what we call nausea. And if you become nauseated, it's going to try to expel whatever is inside that stomach. It can be because of a bacteria or illness or something that is not supposed to be in there, like what we had said, if we're doing too much of, no matter how old this person could be, is if they're taking in too much alcohol too quickly. Okay? One of the things we want to do something like this, at least. So, yeah. Yep. So, anyway, so what we see happening, this distress signal will then be sent to the brain, and it's because of these gastric pits. Now, moving forward, okay, these 3 cells, okay, are vital for the jump start of the breakdown or digestion of dietary proteins. Because it's not, this work's not creating the only enzyme that does it, but probably the most important. Does anyone want to possibly have what in the past, what I don't want to say myself, but what we've come up with to possibly help you keep the distinction between what these cells do and release? This one's pretty straightforward. No one would dispute that. Okay, mucus is coming from, or mucosis is coming from mucus cells. I said that backwards, didn't I? Yeah, mucus is coming from mucous cells. Now, these two types of cells, okay? One of the things you can do to keep this separate, okay, is there an A in chief? No, there's not. But is there an A in parietal? Yes, there is. So one of the ways to keep these two separate, okay, is know that since there's an A in parietal, that's going to release the acid. Okay? And then just by default, we know that these chief cells aren't going to secrete mucus. That's the mucous cells. The parietal cells, since it has an A, is going to release the acid. And then the chief cells will secrete, even though it says digestive enzymes, they are not activated yet. Okay? Yes, they do secrete enzymes, but they're inactive. There's a chemical reaction that has to take place in order for that to occur. Like I said, this here, keeping this separate, especially these two, is very important because I can guarantee you're going to have to be able to describe this, okay? And yes, this is an upper level class, so we're holding you up to higher standards. And I think in the long term, for when you see this again, hopefully you will agree or understand this is for your benefit, okay? And then when we have all three of those together, you just consider that gastric juice. Just like what we would say, saliva is a pretty vague term because saliva has three parts to it. What would it possibly be? Water. What else? A little bit of amylase, and amylase is a what? It's an enzyme, and then why is it so thick? It has mucus in it. So just like saliva is a vague term because it has those three components, gastric juice is very similar in nature. It has mucus, acids, and enzymes in it. Okay, so this is how a lot of your proteins get digested in your stomach. Or, excuse me, is initiated in your stomach, but then takes place in your small intestine. Okay? Because remember, even though these chief cells, we say they secrete an enzyme, it's also inactive, which means it's not going to do a darn thing. It's not going to do anything until the parietal cells that secrete the acid, once they come in contact with one another, then you will have an active enzyme known as pepsin. So is there pepsin in your stomach? Yes, there is. But how do we arrive at that term pepsin? The chief cells have to secrete what? Is it active or inactive? You have to be precise when you're explaining this. That these chief cells, they do secrete an enzyme, but it's not activated yet. Okay? You have to include that, because otherwise we're not describing it correctly. Then, once this enzyme comes in contact with HCl or hydrochloric acid, this chemical reaction activates the enzyme pepsin, activates the pepsinogen to pepsin. Okay? So where's that HCl coming from? The type of cell. You got three choices. Is it mucous cells, parietal cells, or chief cells? Why is parietal correct? Because it what? Coming from the chief cells, that's true. Then, right, parietal cells do that. But again, you're right, but we just want to make sure that we keep that distinction in place. Okay? Now, for some people, maybe they have a problem breaking down these proteins because if they don't secrete enough acid in their stomach, they just can't break these components down because that enzyme is just not active enough. So it's what would be what is that? Somebody singing? Like for instance, if you really probably don't want to be hunting mountain, because that's kind of been in the news. There are mountain lions roaming around western South Dakota. Okay? You probably do not want to be walking around hunting mountain lions with a .22 caliber rifle. Why might that be? Anybody know? In my estimation, I think maybe you'd rather have like a 2 or a 3. And it's not that I know a lot about rifles, but I just know that a .222 and especially a 308 has a much larger round. Okay? If you have a potential threat coming at you in this mountain lion, do you bullet or do you want this 308? I think you would agree, you probably want this larger rifle. So what happens in this case is if you have that .22 caliber, you're going to have to keep shooting and keep shooting and keep shooting because you're just not doing enough damage to bring that animal down. Okay? Kind of like the same concept here. If this is not very active, it's just not getting the job done. All right. We will start with this on Monday, okay? And then we'll have our second vocab quiz probably at some point next week, and we'll probably roll out your short answer papers as well. So at that point, hopefully the vocab quiz rolled out just like it was supposed to through Canvas, and we'll see if I get a notification. So otherwise, that's it. We will catch up to you next time.